So today we have a special guest here. We have Jeanetta Churchill. She is a research professor at Morgan State. Jeanetta, we are so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here today.
All right, so cool. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about why you're here today.
Well, I am here to share my experience of both being an advocate for mental health conditions and also my experience of living with a mental health condition.
Okay, and would you like to disclose what that mental condition is?
Yes, I have been diagnosed with living with bipolar disorder type 1, and I was diagnosed with that about 13 years ago, and it has been quite a journey. I was misdiagnosed with clinical depression about 12 years before that, and after I finally got my diagnosis of bipolar 1, there was a real shift in how my life journey progressed.
Now, I didn't know that there were different types of bipolar, so can you kind of break that down for me? Is there a 1, 2, and 3? What does type 1 mean?
So type 1 is probably the most severe type of bipolar disorder. So in bipolar disorder, there are two poles. There's mania, which is the high end, and there's depression, which is the low end. So depression, you experience sadness, you experience low energy, and then when you experience mania, you're on the high end, where there's high energy, you don't want to sleep, you may spend a lot of money, you may fly into rages. For me, I tend to stay on the manic end of things. People who have type 2 may not experience as severe a level of mania. I tend to experience my poles more severely in type 1, and so that's the diagnosis I got.
So how did you come to find this out? Like, was there a major episode that occurred, or how did this just all come to be, so to speak?
Well, it was interesting. Back in 1992, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. I had been experiencing a lot of pain and went to see a doctor, and I was struggling a lot with pain and a lot of sadness, and the doctor told me you probably have depression. So at that point I started taking medications, different antidepressants, which were going to help bring my mood higher, and I started seeing a therapist, but I never seemed to get any better. I tried different types of medications, I saw different therapists, but nothing seemed to help me. And so this went on for about 12 years. I just kept cycling through different meds. And one therapist that I saw asked me, has anyone ever talked to you about having bipolar disorder? I said, bipolar disorder? You've got to be kidding me. Because I said bipolar is for crazy people, and I'm not crazy. I told that therapist that he was a quack, and I went on my way, and I kept taking my antidepressants, but at that point I didn't realize I was continuing to get sicker and sicker. I did have a major episode. It happened at work. I really went off the rails. I started getting angry, and I got angrier and angrier, and I didn't know how to cut off the angry. I started cursing at people in the workplace. I started wanting to hurt people. I realized that if I didn't get help, I probably would hurt somebody. So I actually that day walked off the job and went to go see that therapist. And at that point, my heart was racing. I was wanting to break things, throw things, and I told him I need to get help. So he consulted with a psychiatrist, brought him in a doctor, and after the three of us discussed things, they told me that I needed to go to a hospital to get help, a psychiatric ward. The hospital was not all the terrible things that I thought it was going to be. It was a place that was actually a safe place. They didn't put me in a straitjacket. They didn't put me in a padded room. There were people with different diagnoses there, but it was a place where I had my own room. I talked to different therapists, I talked to different doctors, and I started medications, and I was finally able to calm down. And that's where I started my journey to health.
Now, when you started taking your medication, were you hesitant to take it?
I really did have a lot of issues in my mind about taking medication. At first, I was very resistant because I still struggled in my mind with my diagnosis. I did not want to accept that I had bipolar disorder. I knew on one hand that I had these symptoms and that I needed help, but I just kept thinking, I don't want to have this label of bipolar disorder. So I would cycle through taking the meds until I felt better, and then I would go off the meds, and then I would get sick again. And it was this vicious cycle. It was like I was riding a roller coaster. I would take the meds, feel better, stop taking the meds, get sick again. And it was really a dangerous cycle because I was getting sicker and sicker. And I did this for years, and I ended up back in the hospital again. And I was in the hospital this time for almost 2 weeks. What made me go to the hospital was I became suicidal. My mind had gotten so out of control, I actually started thinking about killing myself because my thoughts were so out of control. I just felt like I didn't want to live anymore. So what happened when I was in the hospital this time is they changed the dosages of my medications and got me at a better dosage to help stabilize me. I worked at that point with a psychiatrist, a doctor, a therapist, and a social worker, and they came up with a treatment plan for me. And I was stabilized and was able to go back home. And this time I personally committed that I was going to follow the plan. Once I started following that treatment plan, my life really turned around. And for the first time, I was able to live a stable life. I wasn't riding the roller coaster anymore. And I realized that by accepting my diagnosis and accepting treatment, I could live a stable lifestyle and have a peaceful mind, and it was worth it for me to take the medications. So what I would recommend for someone who uses medication is to stick with the process. Don't give up. So many people give up on the process because of side effects. You know, they say maybe after the first medication, because it makes them feel bad, that they don't want to do it, and they give up, but they're still sick, and they just give up on the process. So I want to encourage someone to stick it out and don't give up on the process.
Now, I know that you do a lot of research at Morgan. However, I do know that you are very, very active in your community in speaking out about bipolar depression. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. I work as a volunteer with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. And one of the things that I work with them in 3 different aspects. One is I'm a public speaker for a program called In Our Own Voices. I go and speak about what it is to live with mental illness, and I give people opportunities to ask me questions about my life. And it really tears down prejudices and stigma. And so many people come to me after my presentations and they thank me because they're like, you really changed my mind. What I believe is that mental illness is the great equalizer. 1 out of 5 people in the United States are impacted by mental illness, and it can really hit any of us. So I think everyone needs to learn about it.
Now, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing that I do with NAMI is I participate in a program called Smarts for Advocacy, where I go to speak with lawmakers about mental illness. So when there is some law that's being considered that impacts public health or law around mental health disorders, hopefully me sharing my story will impact the decisions that these lawmakers are going to vote on. And finally, the program that I'm excited that I've most recently worked on is helping to develop a faith-based curriculum toolkit with NAMI. So many faith-based institutions don't know how to help people living with mental illness. So many times they get rejected when they go to their pastors or their imams. So NAMI has put together a toolkit to help educate the faith leaders, to let them know how they can better serve people in their congregations living with mental illness. So I was part of the task force that put together that toolkit, and that's some work that I'm especially proud of.
That is neat. Now let me ask you this. What would you say is the biggest misconception about bipolar depression?
That people with bipolar are somehow more violent. I believe that media drives a lot of that. Data has shown that people living with mental illness are more often likely to be the victims of crime than to be the perpetrators of crime. Because so many times people living with mental illness are more likely not to have jobs, they're more likely to be living on disability. They're not going to be out there perpetrating crimes, but rather to be victims. And so I really want to dispel that myth that people are living with bipolar are out there going to be being murderers or attacking people.
Okay, so if you could look into the camera right now and put out your public service announcement for people either living with bipolar depression or people who might be skeptical around people with bipolar depression, what would you tell those people?
Today I want to speak to people who may believe that they have bipolar disorder. I just want to encourage you that you don't have to be fearful. It's something that you can live successfully with, that you can get help with your disorder, and you can live in recovery very successfully. If you are someone who has a family member or a friend who has bipolar disorder, it is very possible for you to be an advocate and a helper to them. And I want you to reach out, and you can get help from an organization like NAMI and be able to provide support to your friend or family member. And finally, if you're someone who needs to learn more about mental health disorders, I want you to know that people who live with mental health disorders like bipolar disorder, it's nothing to be fearful of. People, again, 1 out of 5 people in our country have a mental health disorder. They hold jobs, they own homes, they have families, and they're very loving people. All of us are, and I want you to know that you can be a support as well. If you want to reach out to me, you can contact me through my website, mentalhealthmentoring.com. And if you want to get more information about getting support or education, you can go to namibaltimore.org. Thank you.